All right, today we're going to dive into a fascinating story about how a really simple request for some wooden boxes ended up sparking a total overhaul of a company's logistics and, uncovering huge opportunities that were just hiding in plain sight.
So, let's start with this quote from a logistics manager at a high precision German manufacturer. It perfectly sums up the heart of this story, doesn't it? I mean, even the most amazing piece of engineering is totally worthless if it shows up broken. So, where does this all begin? Well, it wasn't with some big crisis or complicated business proposal. Nope. It all started with a simple, practical need. Okay, so picture this. You've got this family-run company, right? They're absolute masters of precision engineering, building these incredible, really high-value machines. But now, they've got this classic challenge. How do you ship these massive, sensitive pieces all across Europe on a one-way trip? The packaging has to be cheap enough to not come back, but strong enough to be completely foolproof. Their first call to the packaging supplier was surprisingly basic. All they needed were some extra long, foldable plywood boxes, specifically in a few different lengths, 2.4, 3.2, and 4.2 meters to fit their different products. Seems like a pretty straightforward transactional request, right? And things moved fast. That first phone call led to an order for 150 custom boxes within just a few days. The first shipment was a success, everything went well, but it was the second request, just a little while later, that was about to change absolutely everything.
This right here, this is the turning point. This is where a simple customer-supplier deal really becomes a true technical partnership.
And here's where it gets really interesting. When the manufacturer called back asking for a small change, the supplier could have just tweaked the design and sent the invoice. But they didn't. Instead, they did something proactive. They said, "Hey, how about we come out and actually see your process in person?"
That visit to the factory was absolutely critical. Just by walking the floor and watching the whole process, from packing the box to loading the truck, it became obvious that the need for a long box was just the tip of the iceberg. It was a symptom of much bigger, hidden problems that the team had just, come to accept as part of the job.
So, let's dig into the first and, honestly, the most critical issue they found, a problem that was putting the product itself at serious risk. Try to picture this. You've got a forklift in a narrow aisle, and it's forced to pick up this long, heavy pallet right from the middle. As it lifts, the whole thing starts to bow under the weight. We're not talking a lot, maybe just a few centimeters, but that little bit of flex creates these intense pressure points inside the box, right on the delicate, very expensive equipment it's supposed to be protecting. It was literally a disaster waiting to happen. The solution they came up with was so elegant, and it had two parts. First, they engineered a special opening right in the side of the pallet. This let the forklift get its forks to the exact center of gravity. And second, they added wooden supports inside the box, lined up perfectly with those lift points to spread the load out and stop any bending. And the result? It was immediate. It was profound. During the very first test, the logistics supervisor was just visibly relieved. He said this one change solved a source of stress they'd been dealing with for years. I mean, that's the kind of impact you get when you really understand a problem from the ground up. Okay, so with that big safety issue handled, they turned their attention to another problem, one that was a constant source of frustration and delay for the poor folks on the packing team. You see, the manufacturer's products were all different shapes and sizes. Some were long, some were just odd, and each one needed a different way of being strapped down. On the old pallet, workers basically had to improvise, wasting a ton of time just trying to find a solid place to anchor the straps. The solution here was a complete redesign of the pallet's top deck. Instead of solid wood, they created a new surface with these uniform 50mm gaps between every single plank. And just like that, this simple change turned the entire pallet into one big universal tie-down grid. The impact was huge. The packing team said that this one little improvement saved them many minutes for every single box they packed. Now, when you're shipping dozens of these things every week, that time adds up to a massive win for efficiency. All right, the final challenge they tackled was all about cost effectiveness. It was about making every single shipment count. The issue was simple. They had a one-size-fits-all box height, but not all their products were that tall. So what was happening? They were constantly shipping empty air, which is a really expensive and inefficient thing to do. It was just driving up their transport costs for no reason. So the solution was all about flexibility.
They developed two different wall heights that were compatible with the same base, a standard one for the bigger components and a new, lower height version for the more compact stuff. This gave the logistics planner the power to optimize every single load and pack their trucks way more efficiently.
So let's pull all of this together and really look at the total value that was created here. All because a simple transaction turned into a deep collaborative partnership.
I mean, think about it. The manufacturer didn't just get a better box. They got safer handling, way less risk of damage, much faster packing times, and optimized shipping costs. But really, the most important thing they got was a strategic partner, someone who understood their entire process, not just a single order. This quote from one of the company's own engineers just says it all, doesn't it? They started out looking for a product, a commodity. What they ended up with was a whole new way of thinking about a core part of their business. That is the real transformation. And that really brings us to our final thought. This whole case is such a powerful reminder that sometimes the biggest opportunities for improvement are hiding in plain sight. They're disguised as those little annoyances, the things we've all just accepted as part of the job. So it leaves us with a question. What are those daily friction points in your own world that might be pointing to a much bigger and much better solution?